The restaurant was noisy, but it felt like everything was muffled under a glass dome, every movement too precise, every smile too tight. We were sitting in Magnolia Row in Charleston, South Carolina. A typical family dinner, long table, white tablecloths, glasses of Prosecco, and hypocrisy plated like a cheese board. I sat at the end of the table, next to Joshua, my son. Between us was one empty plateau, symbol of how cold the connection had become. Courtney, his wife, was especially radiant tonight. Literally, sequin dress, highlighter on her cheekbones, lips in a shade called raspberry bold. Everything screamed Instagram dream, except her eyes. When the waiter brought my order something simple, lemon chicken, I made a mistake. I said, "Thank you, it looks perfect. I'd love to get the recipe for a friend in Savannah." An innocent comment, but Courtney froze, then suddenly turned to me, grabbed my plate and flung it across the table. "You're a witch! You ruin everything!" The plate shattered on the floor, sauce on the tablecloth, chicken under someone's feet. Silence sat down at the table faster than the breadbasket. Everyone turned. Someone gasped. Someone laughed out of shock. And me? I just adjusted the napkin on my lap, looked at Courtney, then at my son. And he looked away. I wasn't shocked she did it. What shocked me was that no one was surprised. I looked up and met the eyes of the waiter. Young man, maybe 30. Black hair, serious eyes. Name tag, Julian, assistant manager. He didn't look away. On the contrary, he nodded slowly. Like he knew this wasn't random. I wiped my palms on the napkin, turned to him and said, "Check please, just mine." Behind me, voices murmured, "Courtney, that was too much." She's just the mom. Marilyn always stirs things up. I wasn't listening, I was already standing, and that inner voice, the one that had stayed quiet all this time, finally spoke. This isn't about the plate, it's about the story they tried to bury. When did it start? I don't know. Maybe the day Joshua first said, "Mom, let's not talk about Courtney, it's awkward." Maybe when she moved in and my things were accidentally stored in the attic. Or when she joked I was a mother spy agency because I knew too much. Or maybe right now, when the plate broke and something finally came together. I walked toward the door, calm and steady. And then someone stepped up beside me, Julian. He leaned in quietly. "Ma'am, I saw her yelling at you last month, in the hallway by the restrooms. I was working that night too, just so you know you're not alone." I nodded. To him, to myself, to that shattered plate they thought I'd pick up. But I left it there. Let them look. Let them see. A flashback doesn't hit like a slap, it seeps in slowly, like tea down the walls of a mug. I remember standing at the kitchen counter in my Charleston home the first time Courtney came over. Back then, she wasn't a daughter-in-law, just Josh's girlfriend. She walked in like she owned the place. $300 sandals, the aura of a Pinterest queen. She said, "Oh wow, you still have wallpaper? How? Vintage." I smiled. A real smile back then. I still believed in normal bonding. I believed her when she hugged me a little too tightly, when she called me Miss Marilyn, with that tone just barely mocking. And then came the little things. Strange things. I'd be cooking dinner suddenly, the salt was gone. I knew I bought it. Josh's college t-shirt gift from his late father disappeared. It never turned up in the laundry. The electric bills started arriving later, but the amounts were higher. I asked, "Did you pay this, Josh?" He frowned. "Courtney said you probably just mixed something up. You're not great with online banking, right?" "You probably." That phrase became background noise. I heard it in my son's voice when he spoke about anything from vacations to dinner plans. "You probably just didn't know. You probably forgot we canceled that." I noticed. I always noticed. Because I'm an accountant, I've worked my whole life with numbers, balance sheets, unpredictable budgets. I see when the math doesn't add up and when the smiles don't either. But I stayed quiet. Because he was happy. Or pretending. Because in his voice, I heard a note I've known since he was a child, tension wrapped in polite calm. The same note I used to hear in my own voice back when I lived with his father. I didn't call, didn't accuse, didn't raise my voice. I just wrote in a notebook. May 14 check. $423 for design help. Listed as shared. But billing goes to Courtney. Son doesn't laugh when she's around, only says, "It's fine, just tired." I became inconvenient. Not loud, not combative. Just a quiet splinter impossible to ignore, if you're being honest. One night after dinner, I asked, "Courtney, what happened to my mother's china set? It used to be in the cabinet." She smiled. "Oh, it was so outdated. We thought maybe we could donate it." That's when I understood. This wasn't about the china. It was about the boundary they erased without even asking. I stayed quiet. But it wasn't for peace anymore. Inside me, something had begun to rise. A pause before the storm. It started with his shoulders. Josh had always been tall and strong, the kind of boy who carried all the grocery bags in one hand, who ran long-distance track in high school. But that evening, when I brought him a sweater and he turned around, it looked like his body had shrunk. He seemed lighter, but not in a good way. "Mom, I just dropped a little weight. Courtney and I are doing spin classes," he said. But then I found unfamiliar supplements in his room and decaf coffee. Josh hated decaf. He started speaking in shorter sentences. His "hey mom" sounded rehearsed. He smiled, but not with his eyes. His eyes were clouded, like weather pulling back before a storm. One day I arrived early. We were supposed to go to the pharmacy. I rang the doorbell. No answer. But the door wasn't locked. I stepped inside. Heard a voice from the bathroom. His voice. A whisper. I stopped outside the door. Not on purpose. I wasn't eavesdropping. It just happened. I don't know who I've become. Then silence. Then the sound of water running. I left. We went to the pharmacy. He acted normal, like nothing happened. But I couldn't unknow it anymore. That's when I started keeping record. Not because I was planning revenge, but because if no one else sees reality, someone has to preserve it. Somehow. I made a spreadsheet. Google Docs, of course. Old habits die hard. Column 1. Date. Column 2. What happened? Column 3. What was said? Column 4. What wasn't said? The 14th of September. Josh didn't eat anything at the family dinner, said headache. Courtney called him too sensitive. The 19th of September. Transferred $250 to Courtney's account. She said it was for her therapy. He looked lost. The 22nd of September. In front of me, she called him a mistake from mommy's past. He didn't argue, just nodded. That spreadsheet became my only response. My shield against being gaslit into thinking I was crazy. Because people started saying I was exaggerating. That everything's fine, you just don't understand modern relationships. But I knew my son. I carried this person. I held him when his father left. I stitched his tie for his first internship. I know how he smiles when he's happy. And now he smiled like he was apologizing. Like having me near was inconvenient. I didn't interfere. Not yet. But I watched, and I documented. Sometimes that's all you can do. Until the truth finally wakes up. Sometimes the truth doesn't scream. It whispers. Sometimes you have to piece it together like shattered porcelain so someone, anyone, will see it was once something valuable, not trash. I started keeping a journal. Not a paper one too easy to lose. I created an encrypted file in Notion. Named it The Quiet Archive. Each entry came with a date, a place, and details. Not to threaten anyone, but because no one believed me. And I was tired of being told my instinct was just paranoia. Here's a message from Courtney that Joshua accidentally forwarded to me. You ruined it again. I defend you, and you can't even look normal in a family photo. If you want to live with Meg, get used to standards, or run back to your pathetic mommy. Then another. I'm spending my time on you. The least you can do is cover my medical and aesthetician. I'm not a damn charity. I saved them. Screenshots with timestamps, device info, metadata. Next, this bank statement, $1,600 transferred for cosmetic treatments in Savannah. Recipient's name wasn't Courtney's, but the shipping address was. Another file, insurance documents, a new policy. Her name listed as the primary beneficiary. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Because arguing with an abuser is like fighting the wind. They don't listen. But I saw. And I knew one day I'd need this truth. Because while everyone else laughed and ate dessert at pretty tables, I sat with spreadsheets. With numbers. With reality. Sometimes love isn't a hug. Sometimes it's silently preparing to pull someone out. When there's not an ounce of them left in their own life. I felt it the moment I saw the invitation. It didn't come directly from Courtney, it came from my son, Joshua. A short message. We're having dinner Saturday, anniversary, 7 p.m., Hope Street Kitchen. No, would love to see you. No, Mom, please come. And I knew this wasn't an invitation. It was an order passed down. Which meant she didn't want me there. Which meant I was going. I arrived quietly, without making a scene, without drawing attention. Gray cardigan, hair pulled back, makeup barely there. Still, I felt her look at me. That top-to-bottom glance Courtney always gave when she felt threatened but pretended not to be. In the room, her side of the family, parents, friends, a couple of coworkers. I took a seat at the edge. Didn't join conversations. Just smiled politely. Joshua looked hollow. He held a glass of wine, but barely touched his food. Then the toasts began those formal thank yous they always do. Courtney thanked her parents for teaching me standards. She thanked Joshua for trying so hard to live up to them. I raised an eyebrow. The rest of the room laughed. I wanted to stay silent. Truly. But then Courtney threw out, "And thank you for no longer interfering with our budget." I responded softly, calmly, barely above a whisper. Interesting. So March rent really did come out of Joshua's old account? I noticed the charge. She froze. For 1 second. Then she exploded. Louder than I had ever heard her. You witch! You ruin everything! And then a plate. Thrown. Not at me, but close enough. It shattered like a gunshot. Silence. Someone gasped. Someone stood. I stayed seated. I just looked at Joshua. He lowered his head. And then I noticed someone approach me. Julian. The waiter. Young. Maybe 25. He'd been quiet all evening. A shadow by the wall. He leaned in and whispered, "Miss Marilyn, it's okay. I know it's not you." He placed a glass of water in front of me. And something else. A napkin. On it a note, written in pen. "If you ever need a witness, I'm here." I nodded. Because this wasn't about a plate. This was a line. The one after which you stop staying silent. The plate shattered with a sound like something else had cracked along with it. Not just porcelain, but that thin shell of pretense Courtney clung to so tightly. The sauce sharp, red slid down the white tablecloth like a mark. The waiters froze. The family stared into their plates, as if not looking at me would make it all disappear. Even Joshua. He just sat there. Eyes down, hands under the table, no reaction. As if he wasn't really there. I reached for a napkin, slowly, without fuss. Wiped at the sauce, not all of it, of course. But it wasn't about the stain, it was about the gesture. A woman's gesture, a caretaker's, almost a mother's. I stood up. But not to leave. I looked at each of them in turn. At the woman who once gave me a weak smile at the altar. At the man who called me old-fashioned. At Joshua, my son, whose hand I once held when he lost his first tooth. And I said, if I'm a witch, then maybe it's because I see what others try to hide. Because I notice when one person fades while another plays with their life. Because I care. My hand trembled slightly. I wasn't angry. I was just done being a shadow. You can stay silent. That's your choice. But I won't be silent anymore. The waiter, Julian, stood to the side, the only eyes in the room that met mine without flinching. He nodded. Barely noticeable. That was enough. I adjusted my scarf and looked at Courtney. She wanted to say something, I could see it in her face, but she couldn't. The room suddenly felt heavy with silence. I didn't walk out in anger. I walked out in clarity. And in that moment, for the first time in a very long time, I felt, I'm not alone. I was just the one who spoke first. When I turned around at the exit, the waiter Julian came up to me. He folded a napkin and gently placed it in my hand. But it wasn't just a polite gesture. He leaned in closer and whispered quietly, You're Marilyn, right? I nodded, a little surprised. He went on, I heard her yelling at you in the restroom last time you were here. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I heard everything. You're not alone. My hand closed a little tighter around the napkin. Something inside me let go. He didn't say it for drama. This wasn't a conspiracy. It was a fact, a recognition. Even from a stranger, even in whispers. It was the sound of truth. We have cameras, he added. I'm not supposed to tell you that. But there's footage. From last week. She's screaming at Joshua. It's not just an argument, it's... He paused, searching for the word. It's hard to hear. I looked at him, and in that moment, I didn't see a young man in a restaurant uniform. I saw an ally, a witness. We can save it. I can send it if you want. Just let me know. He scribbled his number on a small piece of paper and tucked it into the napkin. I thanked him. Genuinely. Sometimes, truth doesn't speak from the head of the table. Sometimes, it arrives on a tray with steady hands and honest eyes. Sometimes, it's tucked into a folded napkin, quiet but full of strength. And I understood. It's not just me holding this story now. Now I have proof. I didn't sleep most of the night. Not because I wanted revenge. I know too well revenge is when you want to hurt someone back. What I felt was different, clear, measured. A desire to stop it. I opened the folder on my laptop. Inside were screenshots of messages from Courtney accusing Joshua of being useless, notifications of strange transfers from his account, a photo of her new insurance policy where the insured was his name, but the beneficiary was hers. And most important, the video Julian had sent. I didn't want Courtney to pay. I wanted Joshua to open his eyes. I called Dave, his college friend, now a lawyer. I'm not interfering. I'm just passing on what I see. He answered simply, Got it, give it to Joshua. I'll take care of the rest. A week passed. I got a letter. A real, paper one. From my son. Mom, I knew you felt it, but I didn't know how to say help. Thank you for not staying silent. I filed the papers. This isn't the end, it's the first step. I read those words in the kitchen. The same one where he used to eat clumpy macaroni and do homework. And I understood. Silence can protect or it can destroy. I chose to speak. He chose to step out. She didn't change her first name but took back her maiden last name. Marilyn Wells. Without being tied to anyone else's expectations, without compromises. A month after the divorce from Joshua, I moved to Charleston. No, not to run away. To start over. I opened a cafe small on the corner of Church Street. I named it Red Plate. Ironic? A little. Conscious? Completely. On the wall, next to the coffee machine, in a frame, a shard of that broken plate. White porcelain, red sauce, and a thin crack like a story that can no longer be ignored. Above the shard, a quote, If truth breaks the dinner, let it break it loud. People come in and ask, What is it about? And I smile. About every witch having a story, and coffee. Sometimes Joshua drops by. He's lighter now, clearer in his eyes. For now, we're silent, just drinking caramel lattes. That's enough for now. And Julian, yes, the same waiter became the manager. He says, Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it just serves the coffee on the right side of the table. I'm no longer a shadow. I am the light above the table. And now, he's mine. A year has passed since that evening when Courtney threw a plate at me, as if trying to break not the porcelain, but my voice. A lot has changed since then. I stayed in Charleston. I opened a cafe on King Street, red plate, small, with wooden chairs and green curtains like in my grandmother's house. Above the counter, a piece of that very broken plate in a frame. Under it, the inscription, "If truth breaks the dinner, let it break it loud." Sometimes people ask, did that really happen? I smile, yes. And it's not the end, it was the beginning. I wrote a column for Medium. I had been working on it for a long time. I called it Confessions of a Modern Witch. There I openly wrote for the first time, if being a witch means being inconvenient, strong, seeing the cracks, and refusing to stay silent, I choose to be a witch, proudly. If being a witch means not tolerating lies for the sake of harmony, not erasing yourself for someone else's comfort, so be it. The problem isn't that someone threw a plate. The problem is when you, after being hit, silently wipe off the sauce and say, "Thanks for dinner." I will no longer say thank you for pain, only for honesty. The column went viral, thousands of comments. Women wrote, "I just sat there with the plate. Now I act. Thank you for putting into words what can't be explained." I thought I was alone with that shadow at dinner. One day, a letter arrived from a woman in Nebraska. "Your story helped me leave. My husband didn't throw plates at me. He threw words, just the same. And I always thought, just don't provoke him. But then I read your column. I understood I am not to blame for someone else's rage. I took my plate off the shelf, and I left, thank you." I closed my laptop, looked out the cafe window. People were drinking coffee. Someone was laughing. Inside, it was quiet and clear. If this is witchcraft clarity, honesty, presence, then so be it. I am no longer at the edge of the table. I said it myself.